France is home to the world's largest annual sporting event, Le Tour de France. Le Tour de France is engulfed in a rich history of media, with the very root cause of its existence in a feud between two newspapers, Le Vélo and L'Auto. In 1903, L'Auto all but ended the long-standing feud with its predecessor and rival newspaper by creating what many people have called the longest publicity stunt in history, Le Tour de France. The tour is now directed by the Amaury Sports Organization. Starting out as a 2,500-kilometer race, the length of the race varies year to year, with 5,745 kilometers in 1926 being the longest tour of all time. In fact, between 1903 and 2008, over 350,000 kilometers have been covered by the participants of Le Tour de France. That's the distance between the Earth and the Moon. The race is sometimes too grueling for its participants. 10,000 people have embarked on the tour over the past 107 years, but just 6,000 have completed it. The grueling conditions have contributed to international regulations imposed on Le Tour de France. These regulations include that the mileage of the race must not exceed over 3,500 kilometers over 21 days of racing, with a necessary minimum of 2 days of rest. Conditions of the land are also carefully taken into consideration as stages of the race are planned so that flat and hilly landscapes alternate. Over 500 towns and villages have called themselves hosts to the tour, but around 250 towns and villages apply for the honor each year. Le Tour de France has grown to be a large source of publicity for these host cities, and hosting brings in large revenues as they accommodate viewers from around the world. The media have always been a part of Le Tour de France, so much so that in 2010 it was discovered that 39% of those spectators surveyed come first and foremost to see the publicity caravan. Outside of the publicity caravan event, there is also a broad array of other media represented over the 21 days of the race. These media include television broadcast stations and photographers for magazines, newspapers, websites, and photography agencies. Also vastly represented are radio stations and journalists from several print publications. All in all, about 2,050 journalists, 400 newspapers and press agencies, and 54 websites attend and cover Le Tour de France and represent 35 nationalities. There are 450 places provided each day for these journalists, serving as press rooms for their coverage. Coverage of the tour is broadcasted to 188 countries. About 260 cameramen covered the race in 2010, whether by bike, choppers, or platforms in finish areas. These cameramen represented 121 television channels and provided live coverage on 60 of those channels. 240 photographers are drawn to the event each year, representing several different print forms and 70 photography agencies from around the world. 72 radio stations are also represented on the tour. One of the largest events surrounding media coverage of Le Tour de France is the Publicity Caravan, a 45-minute-long parade covering 20 kilometers. The caravan was created in 1930, 27 years after the inception of Le Tour de France. The decision to include the Publicity Caravan was to combat the constant jockeying of participants. The director of the race at the time decided that all riders would be raced by national teams and would all have identical bicycles and equipment supplied by the organizers of the race. In order to fund this expensive plan, the director enlisted France's major brands to offer financial support. The 2010 procession included 600 caravanists, including 12 members of the Republican Guard and 160 decorated vehicles. About 16 million gifts were given away from the 33 brands that were represented in the parade. Many different methods of social media are infused into the publicity aspects of the tour. While Le Tour de France does have a Facebook account and a YouTube channel, they do not have a Twitter account. However, many of the sponsoring teams, participants, and the press following the race have Twitter accounts and tweet about Le Tour de France frequently in the months surrounding the race, and much more frequently during the actual race. In addition to Twitter and Facebook, there are also many blogs that discuss the Tour de France. The Tour de France 2011 will be the 98th tour and will begin in Vendée on July 2, 2011. The tour will end in Paris on July 24, 2011. Planning and preparation for the 2012 and 2013 tours are already underway.